Hello there. My name is Bill Carswell, and today I will be reviewing some of the more odd or interesting beers I was able to find in Blacksburg's vintage cellar. The first beer I will be reviewing is Bluegrass Brewing Company's Bourbon Barrel Stout. This beer was suggested to me by a friend as one that had a very interesting taste, and I wanted to pick it up and try it out to see what it tasted like. This beer is crafted in Kentucky, where most of the bourbon in the United States is crafted, and is aged in barrels that used to hold bourbon in order to control the oxidation of the beer, as well as instill it with a couple of these extra flavors. Other beers are aged in wine barrels, champagne barrels, all in order to achieve a certain type of unique flavor. When I tasted this beer, I found it to be very smooth, with a very interesting taste or hint of bourbon in the back of my mouth. It was extremely drinkable, and I very much enjoyed the taste and feel of the drink. It didn't really have any distinct overtones, but the flavor that remains in the mouth is very woodsy, but fairly light. I would definitely be interested in pairing it with a nice steak or some grilled vegetables, anything you really do outdoors. The next beer I looked into was the Thunderstruck Coffee Porter by Highland Brewing Company. This beer is brewed in North Carolina, despite what the label suggests. It's interesting to note that coffee porters are brewed with coffee, as well as having coffee added after they've been brewed. This particular beer is brewed with a chocolate malt and a midnight wheat to give it a nice hearty flavor. And the Highland Brewing Company uses organic fair trade coffee as a selling point for their beer. I found the taste of this beer to be fairly fleeting, though the beer has a pretty good feel. While drinking, I found that drinking it slowly allowed the flavor to develop a lot better than anything else. However, the taste isn't really all that strong. I didn't really get much of a coffee feel from it, and that was kind of a big letdown considering I was expecting a nice coffee flavor, which is something I enjoy. The next beer was mentioned in class and is the Banana Bread beer from Wells & Young. This beer was suggested to me again by a friend, and I wanted to try it out. This beer is brewed in England and is unique because it is brewed with bananas and fresh hops to give a fairly sweet yet spicy flavor. It's brewed to be aromatic as well as flavorful, and I happened to find this on a couple lists of strange or interesting tasting beers. However, on all of those lists it did achieve fairly high marks. The first thing about tasting this beer that I noticed was the distinct smell of bananas. It was a very pleasant aroma, and it only augmented the taste of bananas that came from the first couple sips. It's a very sweet flavor, highly drinkable, and a very slight bitter taste complements the sweetness that comes from the bananas. I would be very interested in pairing this with a dessert, like a Bananas Foster, or even over some late-night waffles or pancakes down at Waffle House. The final selection I made was based mostly on just how odd the label seemed to me. This is Kelpie Seaweed Ale by the Williams Brothers Brewing Company. This beer is very interesting in that it is brewed based on a pre-1850s Scottish traditional recipe, which included malted barley which had been fertilized by seaweed from the coast, thus dubbing it seaweed ale. This particular selection is a chocolate ale, which should give it a fairly rich or dark flavor. When tasting this beer, I didn't really notice anything that I would call out of the ordinary or odd about the flavor. The chocolate taste had a fairly strong overtone, rich and dark, and there was a slightly salty, spicy, hoppy taste at the end of each sip, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a seaweed taste as much as the label would suggest. Not a bad taste, just doesn't really live up to the oddity of the label. After tasting these selections, I ranked them based on a few categories that I find important when looking for an interesting or an odd beer to try out or bring to a gathering or something like that. In terms of taste, the Banana Bread beer took top marks. Its sweet flavor and unique pairing just makes it the best of the four. In terms of feel, the Bourbon Barrel Stout was the best of the four, mostly due to the fact it was extremely smooth, didn't really have a harsh aftertaste at all, and would combine well with many interesting dishes. The Banana Bread beer also had a good feel, but it wasn't as smooth as the Bourbon Barrel Stout. In terms of drinkability, the Bourbon Barrel Stout and the Banana Bread beer would be worth drinking pretty much on any occasion that you wanted something special or unique. They both had extremely interesting and memorable tastes as well as feels, and offered tastes that pretty much anyone would enjoy trying out at least once. Originality is a category that I personally enjoy assigning marks in, because this can really tell you just how imaginative some of the brewers were when they started looking into how to craft the beverage. The Banana Bread beer again takes first place in this regard, simply based on the unusual combination of bananas and beer, as well as their success in creating a very worthwhile beverage. The Seaweed Ale, I gave high marks simply due to the traditional aspect. I personally enjoy that type of reimagining of an old concept. And the Bourbon Barrel Stout also got fairly high marks due to the integration of a old concept into a well-crafted beer. Unfortunately, the Thunderstruck Coffee Porter and the Seaweed Ale didn't really offer too much in any of the four categories. The Seaweed Ale might be worth buying if you want to really have something to talk with somebody about or to impress. But the Coffee Porter, I would probably say pass, unless you have some sort of real affinity to the organic, fair trade coffee industry. And there you have it. At the end of the day, I would definitely say pick up the Banana Bread beer. It's got a unique taste and is at least worth trying out if you like that sort of thing. The Bourbon Barrel Stout is also a very good selection. It's got a very smooth flavor, and if you like the taste of bourbon, it's probably going to hit home with you. The Seaweed Ale, like I said before, not a top of the line selection unless you just want to be able to say you've had seaweed beer. And the Coffee Porter, I'll have to say just go without it. There are probably better selections. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this review of odd and interesting beers, and I hope this has inspired some of you to go out and try your own. Thanks for watching.